Wonderful. Thank you so much. So today we're going to learn about neuro-linguistic programming. And this is an area that I don't think a lot of project managers really delve into. And I got very interested in this when I started taking some of my coaching classes on the side. Part of that is we're going to also understand how the human brain evolved. So we're going to get into what is going on biologically in our brain. We're going to discuss how does that impact our communication, and then we're going to review metaprograms that project managers should be aware of. And I'm going to define metaprograms later on once we have some base knowledge to move from there. So with that, we're going to jump right in. Neuro-linguistic programming is the processes between the neurological programming, language, and our behavioral patterns that are learned through experience. And this approach to communication as well as personal development was developed in the 1970s. And since then, it has been expanded upon and studied even further. Neuro-linguistic technologies provide a new and powerful integration of some of the best educational research impacting the world today. And so what we're trying to do is actually take what we're learning about the brain and how do we communicate and then move it further down and bring it into businesses as well as your individual life. So some of the techniques and things that I'm going to talk about today, I will encourage you to actually use within your family and friends because they're really powerful tools that just aren't really talked about outside of coaching and therapy kind of circles. So the neural part of neuro-linguistic programming is what your mind is actually taking in and processing. So that's all of your five senses. That's your sight, sound, hearing. And basically what it's doing is what's in the brain? How is the brain processing that? The linguistics part is that communication, that language part. Not only it's about what we say, but it's also about how we say things. How is that interpreted then by the biology of the brain? And also, how does communication affect you? And I have some good examples as we go through this, and I'd love for you guys to really take this as a learning opportunity and a growth opportunity. So as we go through things, really kind of think about how is this impacting me based on different factors. And then the programming part is how do we sequence our actions to achieve goals? And we all take action differently, and different things spur us into action. So one of my favorite things to do with a team is to ask them, what words motivate you? Because some people are motivated by, we got to get this done, whereas that may not really motivate somebody else. It may be like, it would be really great when we get this project finished. And it sounds like a very subtle difference, but there are large impacts. And it's also good to understand what doesn't motivate you. It says, oh, you really should do this. That is not something that would motivate me. So looking for those words that motivate you or demotivate you, and as well as on your teams. And when I say the word team, that could be people who work in the same company as you, could be on the same project team, could be your client. It could be also within your family units or friends as well. So just understand that that's kind of a collective term that I use, not a very specific term. How does that language impact us? Because it's not something that we really think about a lot, especially as project managers. We're so focused on, scheduling and milestones and all this other stuff. But if we take a step back and really look at how we're communicating and how is that communication being perceived, it's going to really actually have a huge impact on how your projects run. We're going to talk about the brain. This is honestly one of my favorite topics. I find it absolutely fascinating just how things develop, how it actually works. That's why I've actually continued to pursue understanding neuro-linguistic programming, even though it really isn't about my day-to-day job. It's because I really love this. So when we look at the brain, 99% of what is going on around us, we do not bring into our awareness. And that's a huge percentage. So our mind is taking in all sorts of information all the time and processing it without us even being aware of that. One of the examples that I love to share is I was in a training many years ago, and it was an IT training, and the instructor, just to kind of prove a point about awareness, basically said, without looking up, how many ceiling tiles are there on the ceiling? As you can imagine, the majority of the class had no clue. It turns out that in one of the classes that she taught, there was a guy who used to install ceiling tiles. So he walks into a room and immediately starts to look at the square footage, what tiles are installed, all of this stuff. So he was the only one, and she used this example hundreds of times, but he was the only one who brought that into awareness because of his past experience and how he filters out information. That being said, we're losing out on a lot of information, and we want to make sure that the stuff that we're not being aware of is stuff that we don't need to be aware of versus, oh, maybe we should start paying attention to that. And how do we do that? And I'll talk through that when we get into the metaprograms a bit more. The other part is with communication, it is the second most thing that we as humans do, and it's second only to breathing. I'm going to give you some statistics that are pretty shocking, but when you start to think about it, it actually makes a little bit more sense. So 7% of communication is the words that we say. That is what's being perceived by others, 7%. Is in our tone and how are we saying those words. 55% is all nonverbal communication. These numbers are really important to keep in mind as we have moved into a much more digital, not face-to-face, on-site type of project management. I know that I have project managed, I've never met the client. I've only talked to them on the phone. So by just having that phone conversation, we're missing out on 55% of what we as humans use to understand what's being communicated. So we need to really place more importance about how are we saying things. What tone of voice are we using? Are we always ending things with a question? Just by our tone of voice? Not. So those are some things to be aware of. And an example that I love to do in a little exercise is, and I live outside of DC, so I take the metro. It's always fun for me to just sit on the metro and just observe people and kind of see what are they communicating to the world. Is it the young kid on his way to school, has his headphones in, is kind of bopping along to his music, or is it the obviously had a really late night, slightly disheveled? I mean, you really can pick up a lot without ever saying anything. So starting to be conscious of that alone is going to help when you start to communicate and how you're thinking about what needs to be communicated in a meeting or in a conversation. So now talk about the different parts of the brain. The brain is broken up into three areas: the reptilian brain, the emotional brain, and then the neocortex. So the reptilian brain is the oldest part of the brain. It's roughly about 100 million years old. This is the part of the brain that is responsible for fight or flight, survival of the actual entity. And so, like, if you think about a reptilian brain, this also is in all sorts of animals and things like that. So it's that reactive brain. And we start to react without it even thinking. And about, like, if you touch a hot stove, you have the conscious thought of, oh, that's hot, I should move my hand. You just automatically pull your hand back. So the part of the brain that is really about direct and simple